Welcome to Life Her Podcast, the podcast that guides you from the 9-to-5 grind to the freedom of your own path. Discover how to conquer life's challenges while pursuing your passions with unwavering faith. Because being an entrepreneur is not easy. So let's get to it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Yvette Lloyd, host of Life Her Podcast. Today, I am joined by Scott Maderer, and a seasoned coach and expert in helping people transition from simply working to their truly living calling. With over a decade of experience, Scott specializes in mindset and behavior change, guiding individuals to align their time, talents, and treasures with their deeper purpose. As a certified human behavior consultant and member of the John Maxwell Team, Scott empowers others to lead effectively, communicate and authentically, and he live inspired lives. He's also an author of Inspired Living, Assemble the Puzzles of Your Calling by Mastering Your Time, Talent, and Treasures. Through his business, Inspired Stewardship, Scott and his wife, Carrie, have been transforming lives and building the kingdom since 2011. Let's dive into Scott's insight and productivity, leadership, and living with purpose. Hey, Scott, how are you?
I am doing great. However, when you say over 10 years of experience, all of a sudden my joints started aching. I don't know why. It's like, when you say it that way, it makes me feel old.
Oh my God. Well, you need to relax those joints then.
I gotta get some Bengay. Gotta put it on there.
That is hilarious because sometimes when I do my introductions, people be like, oh my God, is that me?
Well, I always tell people introductions and bios and those sorts of things, they're sort of like Instagram photos. We always frame them where the dirty laundry's not in the shot, you know. I mean, it's there, but you're not going to see it in the background, you know.
Exactly. It's like you forget about all that you're doing because it's just what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, I want to start off of how do you define calling and why is it important to align with it?
Yeah. So first off, I think there's a lot of confusion around that term calling, because I think a lot of times we ascribe our career and our calling as if they're the same thing. And the truth is they're not the same thing. They may overlap, but they don't have to overlap. They're not really the same thing at all. In fact, the words that we use, you've heard the word career and you've heard the word vocation. Well, the word career comes from a word that means cart in Latin. It means a method of getting from point A to point B, where vocation is now what we would call calling. Vocation is the same root word as vocal, vocalization. It means to be called. So a calling by definition is something that is bigger than just the assignment you have, the role you have, the occupation you have, the career, what you're doing today. It's something that kind of lies behind that or below that or within that. And kind of those threads that you can bubble through all of your life are often related to your calling, what you're meant to do. How you recognize it and is when you're doing it, when you're doing something that's kind of aligned with your calling, it tends to give you energy.
Yeah.
It tends to feed you as opposed to taking energy away. And that's not to say that everything that I do, every day is 100% related to my calling. Guess what? I've got to do laundry and that's not my calling. I've got to put the dishes in the dishwasher. That's not my calling, those sorts of things. But there's still this core passion that when you get to do things that are aligned with it, you feel energized. You feel like you're finally clicking. You're doing the things that matter. And that's why finding ways that you can pull those threads out, even when you're in an assignment or doing something that maybe isn't 100% in alignment, but what can you find from it that you can pull it out and align with? Because those are the things that feed you to do the rest of the things. And obviously, the more you can align different components of your life with your calling, the more times those threads show up, the more energy you get, the more fulfilled you feel, the more belonging you feel, because it shows up not just in your career, but in your relationship, in your spiritual walk, in your finances, and your time, all of the different things that you do, or all of the different components of your life. When you can align your calling throughout all of them, that's when you really start feeling like, okay, I've got it together. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yes. And it's so crazy when I was 18 and I went to college, I was going to school. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be a brain surgeon. I'm gonna do this, and that. So I started off in nursing school, but on the side, my grandmother had me going to school to be an EMT because it was a free course they had offered in the hospital. Lord and behold, once I became an EMT, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. So it's like at the time, I was like, okay, I want to do this, but I want to be in the medical field. So I changed my major so many times, Scott, and until I end up in not even in the medical field, I end up in early childhood education. So it was like I wouldn't even say I wasted like 8 to 10 years trying to figure it out, but it's like it takes a time for you to figure out your calling. And sometimes people be upset with themselves when they don't figure it out until they maybe in 40 or 50 or 60. But how can people be okay with that and not beat themselves up like, oh my God, it's too late, I can't do this?
Right. So, a lot of things came to mind as you were talking. So, one part of it is recognize that finding your calling, like anything else, it's really not a destination, it's a journey. So
Yeah.
you never really get there. It's always kind of one step further. All you're doing is moving towards it. You never really arrive. And that's just, by the way it is. So there is no, oh, I figured it out. It's all together. It's perfect now. Because guess what? As long as you're sucking wind on this earth, things are not perfect. We don't achieve perfection, but we shouldn't not strive for it. So
Yeah.
it's recognizing that the actual win, the actual power, the actual energy, the actual connection comes from the striving, not from the getting, if that makes sense. It comes from the
Yes.
pushing through, not from the, oh, I got it, I've got it all together. The other thing I would say is, going back to you early on, my guess is, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but my guess is it really wasn't necessarily that you wanted to, quote, be a brain surgeon, as much as you wanted to help people and impact their lives in some sort of
Yeah.
way. And
Yeah.
so really and truly, that could have been played out by becoming a brain surgeon. But what you do in early childhood also plays that out. It scratches that same itch of, you're
Yes.
making an impact, you're helping people, you're changing people's lives. Different audience, different methodology, different assignment, different role, same calling, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yes. And that's pretty cool how you put that, because sometimes people will say calling and they be like, it's a calling that God given to them. But the way you strategize it and put together calling, it makes it more sense and it makes it less stressful.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times when we hear calling, it's like something just flashing quick before our eyes and just thinking of something, when in reality it's really a breakdown in moments of our lives and seeing our true character on who we are as an individual. Because a lot of people have input on where you should be in life or what you should do in life, when you have to figure it out on your own for yourself.
Right. Well, and keep in mind, there are people that are doing the thing not because it's what they want to do, but because it's what someone else wanted them to do. So
Yeah.
stop and think for a minute. There's someone who has an appointment to go see a doctor, that the only reason they're a doctor is because their mom wanted them to be a doctor.
Yeah.
Okay, I really hope it's not me who has that appointment. Yes, because that's not the doctor I want to go see. I want to go see the doctor that has a passion for helping people, for caring about people, for healing people. I want to be going to the doctor that wants to be a doctor because they want to be a doctor. And that's kind of something that we get confused. Is, you're right. A lot of times we'll actually live out an activity because others put it on us and kind of push down what our real calling or drive is. And I do believe that, I believe in God. I believe that we're designed in that way and built in that way. But by the way, I also have a background in science. So even if you don't believe in God and you just say we evolve and we develop and there's genetics and all of that, and my degrees in genetics and biochemistry, doesn't matter. It still plays out the same way. You are put together in a particular way between your environment and your genetics that makes you who you are, and makes the things that gel for you gel, and makes the thing, the way you talk, not the way anyone else talks, makes what is you, you. And that's part of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about calling. So I don't care if you want to ascribe it to a higher power in God, or if you want to ascribe it to, purely mechanical clock making. Doesn't matter. The end result is the same. You're wired a certain way, you're put together a certain way. And if you can do that, man, then all of a sudden it's like, wow, this, that's the old thing of, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. You hear people say that. I don't really like that expression, because I think there's some setup for some falsehoods and some frailty there. But it is this degree of, as you do things that are more and more aligned with your calling, they feed you, and it creates a positive energy feedback loop, as opposed to taking energy from you, which pulls you down and makes you, that's where we end up sitting on the couch eating ice cream and, watching Netflix till 3 a.m, and doing those sorts of things that are bad habits.
Yeah. And so, with people still trying to figure it out, what are some of the steps that someone can take to discover their calling? Because sometimes they don't even know where to begin.
So absolutely. I'm going to give you 2 different exercises, because they actually work together. And I'll share some information later where people can actually go download these if they want to. These are also in the book that you were talking about earlier. So there's lots of different ways you can avail yourself of it. But honestly, this is something you can do on your own. So the first one is a looking back activity. So literally just sit down, pull out a notepad, pull out a piece of paper, open up a document on your computer, whatever you want to do. And down the left-hand side, just start writing all of the things that you've done. And I'm being deliberately vague. This isn't just career. This isn't just things that you've done in terms of jobs. I mean, talk about relationships you've been in. Talk about that time you were a counselor and, when you were 13 years old. Talk about just as verbose as you can, as many activities as you can, things that you do as hobbies, things that you do for fun, everything that you do, put it down on the left-hand side. And then next to it, draw 2 columns. And in the first column, for each of those activities, write what are things you love about doing that? What were the things about doing that that you felt connected to, that gave you energy, that you enjoyed, that brought you joy? And then in the last column, write down things about that activity or that role or that thing that you did that didn't bring you joy, that were, we could say hated, but at the very least, the things that pulled energy from you, that you didn't like as much, or that felt draining when you did it. And basically, the goal of this is to fill up a piece of paper. I've seen some people do 4 or 5 pieces of paper, depending on your age and how verbose you want to be. But the idea is then to go back over it and look for patterns. Patterns both on the love side and on the not so fun side. Look for things that keep showing up. They may show up in different ways, but they're related. So for me, things like teaching, things like helping other people really connect to what they're supposed to do. Anytime I've been able to take someone from point A and get them to point C, I love that. I was a school teacher for years. I did it as a school teacher. I was in the corporate world for years. I did it when I was in my corporate leadership role. Now I'm a coach. I do it as a coach. My mother will tell you I started doing it when I was 8 years old. I was always the guy that people came to for advice. So those threads show up throughout all of the things that I do. So that's a looking back activity, and you're looking for those patterns. Those patterns are probably related to your calling. So I'll give you the second activity. This is a looking forward activity. So imagine for a minute that it's 5 years in the future. So it's 5 years from today. And I set this in an airport because back when I worked corporate, I was on a plane all the time and I used to fly all the time. So I put this in an airport. You're walking through an airport. You've been flying home. So you were in this city. You got to fly home to this city, but you've got that layover in the middle and you stop the plane. You get off the plane. You're walking to your connecting flight. And sure enough, those dreaded words, flight delayed. You're now stuck in that in-between airport. You're not where you left and you're not where you need to go. You're in between, and you're going to be there for 3 or 4 hours while you're waiting for the flight. Oh man. So you do what everyone does when they're stuck in an airport. You go find a restaurant or a bar where you can have something to eat or a drink, and you can find a quiet spot and pull up a thing. This is 5 years in the future. And as you walk into that restaurant, you look over and you see a friend who you haven't seen for the last 5 years. They see you, they jump up. How you doing? Yvette, I haven't seen you. It's so great to see you. Turns out they've got a layover too. So you grab a quiet table in the corner, you sit down together. Your friend looks at you and goes, man, it's so great to see you. How have the last 5 years been? And you say, you know what? These have been the best 5 years of my life, because your job is to, on a piece of paper, write what comes after the word because. What is it about your life that would make you say, this has been the best 5 years of my life? What would be true about your finances? What would be true about your relationships? What would be true about your spiritual walk? What would be true about your career? What would be true about your recreational life? What would be true about all of the different components of your life, your health, your fitness, everything that would make you look at a friend of yours and say, man, these have been the best 5 years of my life? And again, the idea is to paint a picture, be very verbose, write a lot. And a lot of times between those two exercises, what will bubble out of it is the things that are giving you energy and the direction you want to go. Now, there's still a lot of work to break that down and develop a plan and put, text, what do I do next kind of things. Mm-hmm. But out of that will come a lot of times, at least the inkling of where you need to start exploring to feed back and go, yeah, now I'm moving in the direction of what I'm really called to do.
So with you educating and helping people reach their calling, you've mentioned your younger self, you had different gifts. You reached that you were a coach, teacher, and worked for corporate. At what moment when you become who you are today to figure out that your calling right now aligned with everything that you've done?
Well, that's the truth is I kind of discovered as I went, when I was a teacher, I was always the kind of teacher that I didn't like to just stand at the front of the room and lecture. I wanted to do interactive activities. I wanted to do Q&A. I wanted to engage the students in a different way than just, do the 5 questions at the back of the chapter kind of thing, the way unfortunately happens a lot. And luckily I was a science teacher, so it was a lot easier for me to do activities and engage in that way. But it was a different kind of teaching. And I started realizing what I was really doing even there was coaching, only it wasn't called coaching. It was that idea of engaging with people and pulling out of them what is already there, motivating them, engaging them, entertaining them, all of the other things that come along with that. But yet there was also a lot of being a teacher that didn't align with what I really loved and really wanted to do. When I moved into the corporate world, I moved very quickly into a leadership position, and my job was to develop teams and then also work with clients. Even there, I started finding ways of engaging. When I was working with leaders in the company, I tried to do it in a more coaching methodology and a more engaging methodology. I tried not to just be a manager or a director, but rather a leader, somebody that engaged with folks. People would come in, I got a problem. Great. What do you think we should do? Tell me about the problem. Tell me what you think we should do. Yeah, great. Go do that. I wasn't the one solving the problem. I was engaging with them so that they could solve the problem. Mm-hmm. So even there, it was things that are related to being a coach, only I didn't realize that yet. As I did more and more of it, I started realizing, I need to get better in these areas because this is what I really like to do. So I started educating myself and learning more about it. That's when I learned the name, but I was doing it before I knew what to call it, if that makes sense, and then as I learned more about it and educated more and got better at it is when I began doing coaching on the side and eventually transitioned to doing coaching full time and, stood up the coaching business. And I tell everybody, I don't know that this is the last thing I'm going to do. I may change, fields again. I don't know, but I love what I do because a lot of what I do around my podcast, around the book, around my coaching with clients, around workshops and other things I do, they feed into that itch of how I like to engage, how I like to lift up, how I like to serve, and how I like to develop others.
Mm. So, can you share a success story from your coaching journey that highlights the power of finding one's calling?
Yeah. So one of the clients, and I actually highlight them in the book, Allison and Peter, and they were already a lot of the way along in terms of knowing, who they were, what they were doing from a career standpoint. But what was holding them back in their case is they were struggling around the area of money and finances because they were doing things, and those things were even the right things, but then the way they were living it out wasn't really achieving what some of their deeper goals and deeper passions were, and instead was holding them back from being able to do everything they wanted to do. So, example, she was a nurse. Well, because of their financial situation, she was ending up working a lot of overtime. Part of her calling is she wanted to be home and engage with the kids in certain ways. Now, she didn't want to be home full time. She wanted to work still, but she didn't want to work as much as she was. He had kind of split off from an agency and had started his own business and really had this dream of getting the business going. And he loved working with people in the area of marketing. I mean, that he's truly gifted at it. And he really loved doing that. And he wanted to do it, under his own banner for himself, not as an employee. So he'd split off and started his own business. But again, because of a lot of psychological and fear things that he had, it was holding him back from growing his business. So his business is not doing well. She's now working all this overtime. She's not able to do some of the things that she really felt called to do. What does that do in a marriage? That creates friction.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, they loved each other. They were on the same page a lot of the time, but there's still friction there. And so
Yes.
we started working together, and they, knocked off a lot of goals. His business went from actually doing pretty good, but in his mind doing terrible. He felt he was just one client leaving away from having to close the doors. It really wasn't true, but he couldn't see that. And as we got his mind straight and his behavior straight, his business has more than tripled in 3 years.
Wow.
She now kind of, if she wants to work overtime, she works overtime. She doesn't want to work overtime. She says, nope, I'm good, and doesn't work overtime. She's getting to do more of what she wants to do. They paid off their house. They had a goal of paying off their house by the time they were 40. They paid it off when they were 38. They paid it off early. All of these different dominoes fell, and it really wasn't because, they did a budget and they did this and they did that. It was because they were engaging around, wait a minute, we do have things that we're meant to do. Let's engage with our calling in a way that lets us be more authentic, more intentional, and less based on fear. And as you get those psychological blocks out of the way, man, the other stuff takes care of itself.
Yeah. That fear is something else. That fear is something.
Absolutely.
So when you have that fear within you, how do you help people shift their mindset from doing more to doing the right things?
Yeah, we wear busy as a badge of honor. I mean,
Yes.
think about it. People ask you, how you doing? Typically, when someone says, how you doing? There's
Fine.
one of two answers. I'm fine, which is
Okay.
really just a polite way of saying, please don't talk to me. That's really what that is. The other answer that you'll give with like friends or family a lot of times is, I'm busy. We actually, even before we started the interview, we were both talking about, we've got meetings coming up. We've got that. I'm
Yes.
busy. I've got a lot on my calendar. I've got a lot going on. So busy is held up as if it's somehow a badge of honor. It's good to be busy. Truth is, busy simply means doing a lot of stuff. So truly, if you wanted to be busy tomorrow, you could go to your backyard, take a pile of rocks from one side of the yard, walk them over to the other side of the yard, put them in another pile, and just go back and forth all day long, moving rocks from one side of the yard to the other side of the yard and back again. And you would be busy.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would be happy. You would look up and go, why am I doing this? Because busy isn't really the badge. That's not really what you're after. What you're after is productive. And productive by definition is doing things that matter, doing things that are authentic, doing things that give you autonomy, doing things that give you purpose, doing things that feel like they matter. And I don't care if you're an employee, if you're a business owner, if you're, a stay-at-home dad, a stay-at-home mom, doesn't matter. It's doing the stuff that feels like it has purpose. That's what matters. So how do you do that? Well, a lot of it is breaking down to what sounds really simple, but it's hard to put into practice. It's simple, it's not easy. And that's the idea of creating a plan, execute on that plan, review what actually happened, reflect about what I liked and didn't like and what would I do different, and then repeat the process. Do it over and over again. And that little Chinese nesting doll of plan, execute, review, reflect, revise, repeat, do it over and over again, and keep doing that, whether it's daily, whether it's weekly, whether it's monthly, whether it's yearly, doesn't matter, makes you start to make little tiny incremental improvements. And as you do that, you get better and better, because you start paying attention to what I like to call invisible time. So the invisible time is, if I ask somebody, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but if I ask somebody, how much TV did you watch last week? People will say, oh, an hour, maybe, that kind of thing. Oh, how much YouTube did you watch? Oh, maybe 30 minutes. How much did you scroll on Facebook? Oh, maybe 45 minutes or so. But then if you actually look at their time, it's 3, 4, 5 times those numbers. A lot of times, how many hours of TV did they actually watch? Oh, 8 hours, spread across. So it's invisible time. We don't even see it in our, it doesn't enter our consciousness. We're not intentional about it. And because we're not, it sucks away time and energy. We're busy, but we're not actually productive and spending time doing the things that matter. So this is less about working 24/7 and, the hustle culture. I hate the hustle culture, sleep when you die, work 24/7, blah, blah, blah. That's stupid as far as I'm concerned. Instead, it's about dialing out, getting rid of the stuff that doesn't really matter to you so that you can do the stuff that does really matter to you.
That's true. So as people assemble the puzzle of their mind calling, what is the one piece they must never overlook?
I think the biggest thing is to not overlook that idea of being intentional and being inspired about it. Meaning not, being intentional means I'm not living life by accident. I'm actually spending time doing the examining, doing that self-reflection, doing that, looking at myself. And don't get me wrong, it's really uncomfortable to do that. It's really uncomfortable to look in the mirror and go, you know what? I'm part of the problem. Matter of fact, I'm kind of the whole problem. Let me fix that. Because it's owning that idea of you aren't a victim. You actually make choices. You have power. One of the phrases that I tell folks is, you're not allowed to say, I had to. Instead, you change that to, I chose to.
Yeah.
Because here's the truth. I could put a gun to your head right now and say, if you don't do fill in the blank, I'm going to shoot you. And there are things that I could put in that blank and you'd look at me and go, well, you're just going to have to shoot me. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So even in that extreme situation, you had a choice. You could say, you're just going to have to shoot me. So there's always a choice. And what we do a lot of times is we abdicate that ability to have the power to make a choice by saying, well, I had to do that. I had to buy a car. I had to quit my job. I had to. And what you're really doing is saying, I have no power. I have no ability to make a choice. And taking that power back, owning it yourself, allows you to begin to actually make those incremental changes that lead to improvement.
That is so true. And what you saying is like identifying yourself and bringing your power back. I'm 41 and I'm just now hitting that point at the moment. And I'm telling you, like from you saying, like scrolling on social media, watching TV, I do so much less of that now, to a point I will sit all day and educate myself most of the day of things that I have interest in, when it comes to, like, if I want to do crypto or stocks, or it's everything that my mindset is at right now, it pertains to building wealth and being wealthy, because I come to realization from like losing people close to me in life, they will work all their lives and still not enjoy life.
Mhm.
And I want to hit a point in my life where I want to like build wealth to a point where I could actually just do podcasting, yet I could travel and podcast at the same time and still enjoy my wealth and have income coming in at the
Mhm.
same time. And I was just so happy that I'm like at that point as far as doing that. And even my health, your health is like so important. It takes a lot of parts in your life for you to even live longer too. So those are like some things that I really focused on, and I've been doing it a lot more consistently now, of getting those like them first 21 days being consistent of doing something. I'm like surpassed that now. So it actually feels good, and it'll feel good when you actually reach your calling. I feel like now it's like I'm at my calling,
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and again, remember, it's always a journey. So you're not there
Yeah.
yet, but you're continuing to learn more about it. One of the neat things that I try to help people do is, I think a lot of times there's kind of two extremes, and the power comes kind of in between. It's what I call the both and, where you kind of do a little bit in the middle. So one extreme is the folks that are, they're fixing to, I'm from the South, so we have that great expression, I'm fixing to go get supper. I'm fixing to whatever. Fixing to is getting ready. And so a lot of us spend a lot of times, quote, getting ready. We're getting ready to do something. We're in preparation mode. We're learning more. We're engaging more. Nothing wrong with that. But there are times that we end up using that as an excuse to not actually do the thing.
Oh, that is
I need
so
to learn
true.
more, so I'm not going to do it yet. I got to learn more, so I'm
Yeah.
not going to do it yet. The other extreme is sort of well, you know what? I know, because I have a tendency to not take action, I'm just going to jump in and make a quick decision and go all in. I'm going to burn the boats, do everything that I can, go all in. That's the folks that look at the get rich quick, I'm going to just put it all in there, and I'm either going to make
Yeah.
it all or I'm going to lose it all. I'm going to bet it all on some meme coin or whatever, that
Yeah.
these activities. Again, it's not a value judgment. It's not these are good or bad. It's that we have a tendency to move to those extremes, and
Yeah.
they're really both based out of fear. One of them is based out of the fear of, well, if I never actually do the thing, then I'll never actually fail at doing the thing. I
Yeah.
haven't succeeded either, but I'm not going to fail. And failure is word. The other is that worry of, that fear of, well, I've in the past, I've not taken action and I've missed out on opportunities. So I've just got to jump in and move, faster. The truth is, a lot of times the key to really living an intentional and inspired life is finding the way to kind of be in that sweet spot in between the two,
Yeah.
where there is some preparation, there is some thinking, but there's also action and doing. And so
Yeah.
finding ways to do it on a smaller scale, finding ways to do it and test it, finding ways to put it into practice way before you're comfortable, but after you've done enough prep that it still feels, there's still some direction to it. It's not just a blind guess. It's not just kind of going all in at the poker table. And
Yeah.
that sweet spot, that both and in between, is hard to do. That's one of the reasons that engaging with other people, hiring a coach, being part of a mastermind, doing those sorts of things can help you, because you have that, or your spouse, others, accountability partners, people who are looking at you going, you've been getting ready to do this for like, 6 months. Are you going to do anything? And on the other end, the person that looks at you and goes, maybe you don't want to mortgage your house for the third time to try to, do that, that kind of thing. So it's
Yeah.
helping you shelter from either extreme and go to that sweet spot in the middle, I think, is really important.
It is. It's really important. So what's the message behind your book Inspired Living, and how does it tie to the framework you teach?
So all of the frameworks that I teach, one of them I shared earlier, that idea, that plan, execute, review, and so on. The other framework that I use in the book is this idea of first we have to invest in ourselves. It's kind of what we were just talking about, only I
Yeah.
didn't use this language. First you do got to do some stuff on you. If you're not able to manage your own limiting beliefs, if you're not able to manage some of your own time, if you're not able to manage your own money, if you're not able to manage the way you think about things and the language you use, do you use the right words both to yourself in your own head as well as what you say out loud? You need to work some on that. And then as you do that simultaneously, so it's not I'm going to finish this and then I'm going to move to the next step. All of these steps kind of happen at the same time. You begin to invest in others. So that's find ways to put it into action. Find ways to do what you're doing in a way that actually reaches out to other people. In part, that's because you'll get feedback. The way you interact with the people and the way they react to you gives you feedback of, hey, am I on the right track? Is this really? And you get to measure, hey, I'm doing this and this feels good. This feels like it fits. I should be doing more of this. Or, you know what? This really isn't it yet. Let me try something different. So you get that feedback as you invest in others. Naturally, as you do that, what happens is you begin to develop influence. Influence is simply the ability to work with other people in a way that gets them to do things, not because it's good for you, or at least not only because it's good for you, but because it's good for them. See, manipulation is when I get you to do something because it's good for me.
Yeah.
Influence is when I get you to do something because it's good for you. Now, I may benefit as well, and there's nothing wrong with that, but my motivation, my focus is not on me, it's on you. That's influence. So you naturally begin to develop influence. And as you develop influence, you then are going to have an impact. So I call the last step impact the world. The truth is, this again, they kind of all happen at the same time naturally if you're engaging in those processes and in that other framework of plan and so on that I shared. So these frameworks work together. And I use frameworks and systems and habits as opposed to there's one way to do it that applies for every single person. Because the truth is, how that framework plays out in your life is probably going to be a little bit different than how it played out in mine or how it plays out in anyone else's. So the frameworks are uniform. What you do within the framework, the actions you take, the behaviors you exhibit, those are going to be individualized.
They are. And that's when you dive a lot deeper into yourself and figuring out who you are. Because a lot of times we just lose our identity or we never discovered it. So taking those steps will actually help a person tremendously for them to be able to do that. So how has your faith shaped your approach to stewardship and coaching?
So, my faith journey, like a lot of people's, is not a straight line, and it's pretty complex. I was raised in the church. My mother and father raised me that way. I was very heavily involved in a lot of things around that. I had a very deep faith. And then as time passed, I began to, kind of get burned. I prayed the prayer that I think a lot of us of faith pray, which is, Lord, please save me from your people. I love God. Not so sure I like some of your people sometimes, and I'm kind of felt the hypocrisy that we all feel and all of this. And I actually left and I considered myself an atheist or an agnostic for decades where I was done with this. Now, interestingly, I still was studying religion and doing a lot of deep faith work, not just in Christianity, but in many of the other faiths that are out there and studying world religion and all of these sorts of things. But I was kind of almost doing it as an academic exercise, or at least I would have told you I was. But at the same time, I still had that faith connection and that feeling that there's something greater out there. There's a spiritual part of what I'm doing. I'm just not going to go back to church because, after all, everyone in church is a hypocrite. Finally, as I got older, I realized if there was a perfect church out there full of perfect people, they wouldn't let me in.
God, yes.
I'm just as big of a hypocrite in my own way. I have just as many failings as my own way. And I also began to realize that, I'm having a hard time walking my own walk. I can't walk anyone else's.
Tell me
The only
about
person I can walk is mine. and as I began to realize that, and I got married to my current wife, and we had a son, and there were a lot of different things showing up in my life. I also went through an experience where my wife and I dealt with some pretty extreme financial struggles. I was actually suicidal because of it. We nearly got divorced because of it. And then we kind of came back together and worked through it. And as all of that was kind of playing out in my life, I returned to that idea of, you know what, I need a community around me. And for me, that included a faith community. And so, I kind of returned to the idea of church. Again, throughout that, I'd never really left the idea of God, but I'd left the idea of church. So,
Yes.
church and God are not the same thing. You do not have to go to church to believe in God. I don't think that, they're mutually exclusive. But for me, it was important to kind of find a church family, find a community of believers. And of course, that comes with pain and difficulty and, arguments and all the other stuff that it comes with. But that's part of the reason why I needed it, is because it's out of that diversity. I talk a lot when I speak in church about the difference between unity and uniformity. A lot of times I think we confuse those two. And that happens in church, that happens in other places. If I go to church and everyone looks like me, sounds like me, believes like me, votes like me, everything, they're all the same. Well, now we're united. And it's like, well, actually, no, that just means you're uniform.
Mm-hmm.
United is, even if there's diversity, you and I may not vote the same way. We may not go to the same, place to get our hair cut. We may not look the same. We may not have grown up the same. You may be from, I don't know, up north, and I'm from down south, and we can't get along. All of those sorts of things that happen. But being able to work together despite that and say, you know what, we don't agree on everything, but it doesn't matter. I still love you. You still love me. God still loves both of us. We're good. Let's go out and help people. Let's go out and do something together. That's actually what unity is.
Yes.
And it's out of diversity a lot of times that comes that strength of true unity, because it's easy to be united when no one disagrees.
Yes.
It's hard to be united when we're not all the same.
Yes.
And to me, that's the challenge.
Yeah, it's a true challenge, and it's a power trip too, because it's like everyone wants to be right, everyone wants to know everything, everyone wants all of that, instead of them holding accountability. Like, no, you're actually wrong. However, if we just put our egos to a side, maybe we could go further and we could accomplish a lot. And I understand what you're saying when it comes to like being in church. I feel like that's probably where I've dealt with the most bullies. And it's really sad, but it's like I found my peace, and my peace is aligning with God on my time and building a relationship. And then that's when a lot of people surrounding me that come together, or people I may meet, they are my church,
Right.
and it makes it a lot more comfortable, and it restores your faith too as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I think, one of the greatest compliments I ever got was from one of my clients who was actually a Muslim. Him and his wife were working with me. And after about a year, he looked at me one day and he says, "You know what, Scott?" And I said, "What?" He says, "You're a Christian, but you're not annoying about it." And I'm like, you know what, brother? I'm going to take that as a compliment.
Yes, that's a
It's
great compliment.
it's like, because I know exactly what you're talking about. I understood exactly what your message is. And thank you. I appreciate that. I try not to be annoying about it, because I do think sometimes we do that. And again, it's not just Christians, it's all faith and
Yes,
all. And it
you're
doesn't even
definitely
be
right.
faith. It can be, it can be about our football team. We
You ain't
all like
lying.
to belong to a tribe. We
Yes.
all want to belong to something. And we want to signal that, wear the right hat, vote the right way, wear the right colors, whatever it is. And all of a sudden, belonging to that group becomes more important than anything.
It
And
does.
when those signals become more important than anything, now we got a problem. And again, that group could be a good group. It could even mean well, it could even do well, it could even do. But when the group becomes more important than anything else, you got to at least worry about, hey, wait a minute, are we actually confusing, uniformity and unity? And maybe we're starting to kind of end up in an echo chamber where we're all telling ourselves the same thing. And so it's easy to believe that we know it all and we have it all put together, when the reality is it's not that we know it all. It's just we all are saying the same things. Do we invite somebody in with a different viewpoint to challenge us? Do we seek out ways to hear the other side? Do we truly care about and get curious about, I'm just curious why you believe the way you do. Where did it come from? Tell me more about how you got here. And when we have those real dialogues and real conversations, all of a sudden it's hard to hate somebody that you actually know, and see as a human being and value that way. And so I think a lot of times we fail to get past that surface level. And, the other side is always evil. The other side is always idiots. The other side is always worthless. The other side is all the labels. When in reality, if we just sit down together and talk to each other, a lot of times we agree about a lot of things. Yeah. We have more in common than we have different, but we don't even bother having the conversation.
Exactly. That is so true. So where can listeners connect with you, learn more about Inspired Stewardship, and get a copy of your book?
Absolutely. So I put together a page just for your listeners. So if you go over to my website, which is at inspiredstewardship.com, and then just /lifeher. So all one word, LIFEHER. Put that in. There's a page there. It's got, I mentioned earlier, you can get the free resources. There's a button there. You can click on it. You can sign up and I'll email you those resources. Below that, there's a place that you could schedule a time with me if you want to jump on a call and learn a little bit more about what I do. There's a place to buy the book. My podcast is listed on there if anyone wants to check that out, and all of those other resources. The only thing on there that costs any money is the book. Everything else is free. And again, you can find that at inspiredstewardship.com /lifeher.
Wow, that is amazing. Well, thank you, Scott, so much. I really enjoyed our conversation. I love your way of calling. You've changed my mindset in this little bit of 45 minutes of time to look at it and view it differently. And I pray that my listeners will get the same view as well. I really appreciate you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Life Her Podcast. Remember to subscribe on YouTube and also listen on all audio major platforms, and have a blessed evening.
Welcome to Life Her Podcast, the podcast that guides you from the 9-to-5 grind to the freedom of your own path. Discover how to conquer life's challenges while pursuing your passions with unwavering faith. Because being an entrepreneur is not easy. So let's get to it.